In the year 331 BCE, on a vast open plain near the small village of Gaugamela in northern Mesopotamia, human history reached one of its most decisive turning points. This was not merely a clash between two armies, but the final confrontation between an ancient empire that had ruled much of the known world for over 2 centuries, and a young king who was about to reshape the course of civilization itself. On that battlefield, Alexander of Macedon prepared to face Darius III, the great king of Persia, in a struggle that would determine the fate of empires and redefine the balance of power in the ancient world. At the time, Alexander was only 25 years old, yet his reputation already bordered on legend. Just a few years earlier, he had crossed the Hellespont with a relatively small expeditionary force, launching what many considered a reckless invasion of the Persian Empire. Against all expectations, Alexander defeated Persian satraps at the Battle of the Granicus, then delivered a stunning blow to Darius himself at Issus in 333 BCE. At Issus, the Persian king fled the battlefield in panic, abandoning his family, his treasure, and much of his prestige. Yet despite this humiliating defeat, the Persian Empire still stood, vast and powerful. Issus was a shock, but it was not the end. Alexander understood this clearly. Rather than immediately pursuing Darius eastward, he chose a more calculated strategy. He moved south along the eastern Mediterranean coast, systematically dismantling Persia's naval power by capturing its key ports. The siege of Tyre, long considered impregnable, ended in brutal victory after 7 months. Gaza fell soon after. Egypt opened its gates to Alexander without resistance. While Alexander consolidated his power, Darius III prepared for a final, decisive confrontation. He knew he could not allow the Macedonian king to penetrate further into the heart of the empire. He also learned from his past mistakes. At Issus, narrow terrain had neutralized Persia's numerical advantage. This time, Darius chose the battlefield himself. Near Gaugamela, he ordered the plain to be leveled and cleared, creating an ideal environment for cavalry maneuvers, mass formations, and scythed chariots. Here, the Persian army would fight on its own terms. Darius assembled a colossal force drawn from across the empire: Persians, Medes, Bactrians, Scythians, elite cavalry units, archers, scythed chariots, and even war elephants from the eastern provinces gathered under the royal banner. Ancient sources speak of hundreds of thousands, even over 1 million men. While such numbers are almost certainly exaggerated, there is no doubt that Darius commanded a force vastly superior in size to Alexander's army. Facing this immense host, Alexander led approximately 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. But the strength of the Macedonian army lay not in numbers, but in quality, discipline, and command. The Macedonian phalanx, armed with 6-meter-long sarissas, formed a nearly impenetrable wall of steel in frontal combat. The companion cavalry, personally led by Alexander, was the most elite shock force of its time. Above all, Alexander possessed something At dawn on October 1st, 331 BCE, the two armies deployed across the plain of Gaugamela. Darius positioned himself at the center, standing on his royal chariot, surrounded by his elite guards. The Persian lines stretched wide, designed to envelop and crush the Macedonians. Alexander, by contrast, deployed his army in depth, with multiple lines and flexible reserves positioned to respond to unexpected developments. The heart of Alexander's strategy lay in a subtle but brilliant maneuver: the oblique advance to the right. Instead of marching directly toward the Persian center, Alexander led his right wing diagonally outward. This movement forced the Persian left to extend its line in response, gradually stretching and destabilizing the enemy formation. It was a calculated move, intended not to win ground immediately, but to create disorder and opportunity. When the battle began, Darius unleashed his scythed chariots, sending them racing toward the Macedonian center. These vehicles were designed to tear through infantry formations, sowing chaos and fear. But Alexander had anticipated this tactic. The phalanx opened its ranks, allowing the chariots to pass through harmlessly, while light infantry and javelin throwers attacked from the sides, quickly neutralizing the drivers and horses. Within minutes, one of Persia's most terrifying weapons had been rendered ineffective. Across the battlefield, the clash intensified. Persian cavalry surged forward on both flanks, seeking to envelop the Macedonian army. On the Macedonian left, the fighting grew desperate as units were pushed back under the sheer weight of numbers. Dust filled the air, visibility dropped, and the sound of metal against metal echoed across the plain. Yet Alexander remained focused, resisting the urge to rush into the chaos. Then, gathering the companion cavalry, Alexander formed a wedge and personally led the charge. With extraordinary speed and precision, the Macedonian cavalry plunged into the gap, smashing through the Persian center like a spear thrust. The attack was sudden, violent, and devastating. Persian guards fell back under the impact, and panic rippled through the ranks. As Alexander drove closer, Darius lost his nerve. For the second time, he turned his chariot and fled the battlefield. The sight of the great king retreating shattered Persian morale. Units that had fought fiercely moments before began to break and scatter. What had been a massive, confident army unraveled into chaos. Alexander briefly pursued Darius, coming closer than ever to capturing him, but news arrived that the Macedonian left was still under heavy pressure. Faced with a critical decision, Alexander chose to abandon the chase and return to support his troops. It was a choice that reflected not only personal ambition, but responsibility as a commander. By nightfall, the outcome was undeniable. The Persian army had been decisively defeated. Gaugamela was not merely a tactical victory, it was the destruction of Persian military power as a coherent force. The ancient Achaemenid Empire, which had dominated the Near East for over 200 years, had effectively fallen. In the aftermath, the gates of Persia's great cities opened one by one. Babylon surrendered without resistance. Susa and Persepolis soon followed, delivering immense wealth into Alexander's hands. Darius III would flee eastward, only to be betrayed and murdered by his own followers, bringing a tragic end to